Welcome to the partnership path in real life. Ever felt the gap between theory and reality? We're here to bridge that. Dive into real stories, real challenges, and real successes from professionals just like you in the partner and channel management world. Each episode is a journey, a lesson from those who've walked the partnership path, faced the challenges, and reaped the rewards. Whether you're a seasoned partner manager or just starting your journey, this is where theory meets practice. Ready to see the real side of partnership? Let's get started.
Well, hey, Trent, welcome to the show. I am so glad that you agreed to come on the podcast and share a little bit of your experience. It's great to meet you as well. Let's start by giving you an opportunity to tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how long you've been working in a partner kind of environment.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, appreciate you having me here. And so I work with Microsoft as part of the global ISV group. I've been working with partners greater than 10 years, primarily from a recruit standpoint. So working with them from the
Okay,
onset, through building with them, defining go-to-market activities, and eventually
yeah,
co-selling together. So very partner-centered.
awesome. Oh, that's great. Now I totally get why we have you on this episode, right? Because this episode is a reaction to the main episode that we just talked about, selling value to partners, and I mean
Mhm.
clearly that's a big part of recruiting a partner. So let's just start by tell me what, when you listened to that episode, when you heard Tony and I talk through it, what resonated for you, what kind of struck you
Yeah.
as interesting, maybe what did you think we got wrong, right? What's your reaction to that episode?
Yeah, no, I love the episode. I thought it was very much aligned to the theme of the episode, right? I believe that in my role, I'm very much delivering from a sales perspective the value of the partnership, the opportunity for the partner to capitalize on what we can do
Yeah,
kind of better together versus that sort of sales to model, but definitely
yeah,
encompassing the value proposition and the revenue drivers of what the partnership can bring.
yeah. So look, you're in an interesting role, right? Because someone says to you, I'm gonna guess at this, so tell me if I get this wrong, but I'm assuming that someone says to you, "Hey, we think it'd be good for Microsoft to have a partnership with either this company, or we already have a partnership with these guys, but not on this solution, and we think we
Mhm.
should get that solution in our fold." Where do you start? How do you figure out what the value is with somebody that, like, you either don't have a relationship with yet, or who, maybe there's a relationship but in a different part, and now you're trying to build something new. Like, what are some of the tips and tricks you use on figuring that value out?
Yeah, I use a lot of candor. I generally like to start top down and have the opportunity to set the stage with the executive team on where our aspirations sit from a partnership perspective, right? And
Okay.
generally, that conversation is a qualifier to see if there's that opportunity to go in
Yeah.
better, do more together type of value proposition, right? And that's my starting point, right? And once there's that executive buy-in, there's a mutual, agreement on our top priorities, what we want to do together, what it is that's important for us that we couldn't do alone. That becomes the basis of when I really get to work. But
Sure.
qualification and clarification for both sides is my starting point.
Yeah. How much research do you have to do to be able to get to that point, right? You said candor, which I assume also means asking questions, but how much
Yeah.
research do you do going in?
Quite a bit. I always look at, because Microsoft's so big and broad, and a lot of our new partners are, multi-billion dollar organizations. I have to
Yeah,
look broadly across Microsoft to identify any history, heritage, activities that would be meaningful. And then, of course, from a competitive landscape, look at things like which cloud providers are they partnered with? Are they in the marketplace? How much have they transformed? And try to gauge, that
yeah,
opportunity from the outside, and then again usher in where we have a strong value proposition to try to open those doors for conversation.
yeah. One of the things I hear a lot of times, in particular in that kind of recruiting space, is that we start out at a particular level. We get sort of executive buy-in. There's sort of an image or a vision that
Hmm.
those executives buy into. But then when it comes to execution, sometimes things get off track, right? So we have this, hey, here's where we think we want to go, but then when we get to the people that are actually supposed to do it, they're not always necessarily in line, right? And so sometimes we end up starting down a path maybe that's in a little bit different direction. So what are some of the things that you do to make sure that we stay on track with what the executive vision was, right? How do you do that? How do you keep that vision? How do you continue to sell the
Yeah.
value? Does that make sense?
It does, and the way my sort of playbook there is just ensuring we have that top level buy-in with regular
Yep.
check-ins, right? And that we have very intentful meetings where, we're tracking those outcomes. We're not meeting on a week sync meeting to just say hello and touch base. It's, did we deliver on the last item? What's the next item?
Yep.
And then presenting that
Yep.
back to the executives. That's fundamental. Often if we're off track, which does happen, or we get a new partner who's off track and we want to get them on the track, it's back to that candor discussion. And often, I don't want to say fear of loss, but it's that sort of a driver to
Sure.
say, hey, look, we've got one of a few spots for a top priority partner. We want to do this with you guys, but we need to move quickly. We need some commitments by this deadline. And if we don't get that, then it's a decision to, kind of maybe revisit, but a comfortable exit point to
Yeah.
then usher in the next new partner.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Maybe I should have started this with this question, but do you see yourself as a salesperson? Like, do you think of your job as a sales job?
I'm definitely selling. I'm definitely in the sales job. I think of
Okay.
myself as a technical hybrid, but
Yeah.
absolutely, I have to sell the value proposition. And once we're getting into partnership together, it's all about driving top line revenue new to the partner, right? So that's where the real
Yeah.
sales muscle gets flexed.
I'm curious, just in talking to you as well. I'm imagining that there's a bit of sales perspective on the back end as well, because at some point you must transfer a newly recruited partner into someone who's going to manage that partner longer term. And there's a little bit of a sales cycle in that too, isn't there? Kind of internally and with the partner on how that's all going to work, right? That it's still going to
True.
be okay, and even though they're going to lose you, because I'm sure they become attached to you in some way. So, is there some selling that happens on the backside of that job as well?
There is, and a lot of that's really driven by where the partnership has landed at that point in time, right? So there's a few different
Yeah,
paths a partner can go down, and it's not always the best case where my colleague will then pick them up and continue to nurture what we've begun.
sure,
But that is
sure.
certainly the goal, and I think in that regard, it's a very solid handoff that is anticipated and welcomed. And sure, there may be, you're like, hey, we like working with you, and that's all great. I work hard for all my partners, but that's usually a graceful handoff, and that's the case of a successful win from my book.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, let me. We try and keep these episodes, relatively compact, and so let me kind of close with you on this. Um, but there is a certain percentage, a fairly decent percentage of our listeners who are relatively new to the partner space.
Hmm.
So when you think about your experience, are there some, what would you say to somebody who's just either getting into being a recruiter or uh, contemplating applying for that partner recruit job? What's your advice to them? What are the things that they should be thinking about early on? Like, what are those, lessons learned that you could bring to the table about selling value and being a recruiter?
That's a tricky question, John. I think there's a lot to unpack there. There's definitely the need for sales experience and customer service
Yeah,
experience, and just a lot of executive sort of face time, because you are wearing a bit of a number of hats in the role.
sure.
Um,
Yeah,
for the folks, I think if for individuals, if you're interested in understanding how software companies make money, that's one of my motivators. I love meeting new companies, understanding how they run their business, how they make their
yeah,
money. And
yeah,
it's always great to, in the partner world, you're building relationships versus trying to sell to them. You're really trying to enable them to sell more, which changes that
sure.
relationship dynamic. So I think it's a bit different than direct sales and that sort of high pressure. the pressure is a bit different, and it's a little bit
Yeah.
more rewarding in the sense that when you do have success, really that success is driven by your partner being successful.
Yeah. That's awesome, Trent. I super appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on the
you.
show with us and sharing your
No
wisdom.
problem.
I really appreciate it. And I hope we can find another opportunity to bring you back on and have you share some more with our listeners.
Would love to. Thank you. Appreciate it, John.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the partnership path in real life today. Remember, the real world tests theories and creates leaders. Don't stop here. Subscribe, learn, and grow with us. Let's make every experience count. Until our next real life story.